Welcome to the Well-Being Manifesto Podcast, where we translate science and experience into realistic and sustainable ways of living. In each episode, we offer clear and practical strategies to support all aspects of well-being that matter to you, whether in your home, your community, or place of work. The Well-Being Manifesto is hosted by Dr. Moain Dabrh and Dr. David Freeman, who have spent their careers advancing whole person care. Join us as we focus on real lives and real change, with less hype, more truth, better living.
Welcome, everyone, to the Well-Being Manifesto podcast. I'm Dave Freeman.
And I am Moain Dabrh. Welcome, everyone. Today's guest is Dr. Scott Fulton, physician, scientist, and author whose work challenges how we think about aging, health, and living well. In his earlier work, Wealthspan, Dr. Fulton explored how health is shaped not just by how long we live, but how well we live. His newest book, Function, takes that idea even further, asking us the question, as a deceptively simple question: are we actually able to keep doing the things that matter to us as we live longer? So today we'll explore what function really means, how to think about it without becoming obsessive, and how everybody, not just the few, can use this lens to live better now and later. Scott, welcome to the Well-Being Manifesto.
Thanks, Wayne. Great to be with you both. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really great to have you. So I'd like to ask, Scott, before the data, frameworks, and books, what personal experiences led you to care so deeply about function? And was there a moment when you realized the traditional health metrics weren't telling the full story?
I think there were many moments, and it goes way back to even in childhood. I had a good friend who was placed in a wheelchair, and we just kind of adapted and moved on. And my grandmother had a big influence on me, as a lot of us seems to be in the Healthspan space. I'm in that group. And so I started watching what was happening in aging, and then kind of fast forward, got involved in athletics and triathlons, where function is clearly an important piece. But ultimately, it came to a point of research career all around gathering data, large blocks of data. And I realized this when I would ask people, how long do you want to live? The common answer is, as long as I can keep doing the things I want to do. And it occurred to me, we don't answer that question because we don't measure what it is we want to do. That means we want to be functional doing things. In medicine, we're so busy focusing on metabolic health, we tend not to look at the actual functional aspect of things that we do. So when I talk about function here, I'm talking not so much about functional health, but the actual doing. And so I said, is there something there? And I landed on this gold mine of data that for some reason I still can't explain. No one's using. So it's going to produce a lot of interesting conversations going forward, I think.
That's exciting. I really I'm looking forward to seeing more and more about this data. And Scott, as you mentioned, kind of where you started from in your first book, which was also an extension to all the work that you've done through practice and research, and with Wealthspan, you started that journey emphasizing that long-term health is a form of capital, that we invest in our health. And now in Function, in reading it, the focus feels more grounded and immediate. So if you can just share a little bit about the background from where you started at Wealthspan message that led you to this moment.
Sure. So when I put Wealthspan together, it was really trying to synthesize what I teach. So I teach adults largely, and that's really where I spend most of my time. And they're all really intelligent, and we focus on all the things to do. And so I wanted to put it together in a way that really distills it down, but at the same time gives enough breadth and depth. I kind of say we all have to be really good engineers of our lives, and that means we have to have skills in a lot of areas. And as soon as we go too deep in one area, it's going to be at the expense of something else. But it was really trying to put together a different perspective on how to view health that was very practical. Like when I talk about diet, for example, I really simplify it and say, I don't put whatever label you want on it, but if it's high quality, high variety, and it's got fiber in it, you've checked all the main boxes, and you'll figure out from there what to do and how to adapt it. So again, coming from, because my background's engineering, that's really that's what got me interested in medicine. And so I started to think about function, I said, so how can we start to measure function in a way that is, and apply it in a way that's really simple, that I can help people connect with really easily. And I think there are a lot of reasons why I'm really excited about this work. And one of them is it's just so darn easy for people, because it relates to what they do every day. It's not about sending them off to the gym and a bunch of other things we can talk about. It really is the things you do every day, just thinking about it a little bit more intentionally. So long way around. I don't know that I answered your question well, but in terms of circling the wagons, maybe.
Yeah, no, that's so what shifted for you? You felt that, and you said there were so many things that happened, but what shifted that made you think that function needs to be part of the central conversation here?
Because I think as more I thought about it, is we talk around health. We don't talk to health. And when you ask people what is health, they don't answer their metabolic health, right? They answer, am I able to do the things that I want to do? That is what we'll call them consumers of health. That's what they view health is, and as they should, right? That's the common language of health. And so that was really what got me interested to say, that's the answer that I want to work on providing to people, because I don't think we've provided very good answers for a long time. And I think it's got a lot to do with why we haven't seen the kind of successes that we think we should be seeing.
When people hear function, they often think of rehab or disability. How do you define function for the everyday person who feels like fine today, but wants to stay capable tomorrow?
So we can look at it I guess across a lifespan, right? So that might be just kind of a good high level way to start out. So we think of a newborn. What's that big moment is when the newborn is now about a year old and takes their first steps, right? And, for that, they're rolling over. So these are what we describe as really milestone moments that are really function driven. That's how we define them, how we measure them. Going forward, we look at function as we monitor children growing into adolescence, and then they become adults. And then we can kind of do this long period where we think nothing's happening, but really lots is happening, until finally we get much later in life. And then we look at the activities of daily living, of, the things like, the very simple things, can you feed yourself? Can you dress yourself, bathe yourself, those sort of things. But there are lots of things functionally that lead up to that. And so that was really starting to think about, what do people do every day? And one of the, I think, best examples is we all walk. Certainly those who are able to. Walking is part of everyday life. There's a lot of information about how we walk that no one talks about. And it's probably one of the most central markers we have of long-term health and function, of all the things that we do every day and talk about.
Let me pick on this, and maybe I like that you said the highlight, because for a lot of our audience, when we start talking about health and aging, just to define the concept of health span and lifespan for the audience, Scott.
Sure, and that so there's really, I think, three terms people throw around. So it's health span, lifespan, and longevity. So maybe I'll start with longevity as the generic, and longevity means whatever you want it to mean, because there is no definition of it, which is why it's confusing for people when we talk about longevity. Again, it's a great marketing word, and it means something about long life, but we have no definition for longevity. Lifespan and health span, we have good and better definitions. So lifespan is literally how long you live. So it's defined by from the time you're born till the day you die. And then health span is really driven by, it's a little bit grayer. There's the the activities of daily living where you're no longer able to do those things and you need help doing things like dressing and bathing. That's clearly what we would define as the clear end of health span. But for most people, it starts earlier than that. And it's really, I look at it to say, as an optimist trying to help people build a long lifespan is to be able to do those things you say you want to do. And those things might be, I want to go to watch my grandchild's or my great-grandchild's graduation, right? So those are things I want to do. I want to be able to go visit with my friends. I want them to be able to come, and I want to be able to have people around me at will. So that's unique to what we all think about. But so it's that gap now is really the piece where we're all trying to manage, is that gap between health span and lifespan.
It's translating the ability, capacity, and quality for the time that a person is going to live.
Right.
Yeah. So with your work, you're highlighting, that simple physical and cognitive measures, for example, as parts of function, often predict outcomes better than many diagnostic advanced tests, other tests that we often talk about or rely on. Why do you think that we have overlooked these basic physical and cognitive measures if you can elaborate on that?
Right. So I think maybe just to kind of back up, the first part of your question would be, so in medicine, we're largely focused on what are the markers of disease, not the markers of ability, right? So it's not that it's wrong, it's just that's what medicine's there for. And so we just don't focus on it. And the second part of your question is, why do you think we've missed it? I think it's because what happens in every large organization, by design, we end up siloing things. And so we silo based on any number of specialties we might think of. So if we think about function, going back to where I started with, it's over a lifespan. So we have pediatric function. Well, they're not talking to the geriatricians at the end of the line to say, well, what are you seeing? Right? They're in different worlds. They're not talking. We're talking about sports rehab. Well, how do I get you back on the playing field? They're a part of function, but they don't talk to either of those groups. We have occupational health. So we have all these different silos that are all contributing to all the functional data. And of course, they need normative data as baseline to work to say, well, what is normal? But for whatever reason, we haven't used that normative data to bring that to the general population and say, what does this mean for you? And what might we be able to do to help you essentially figure out where you are and what trajectory we're talking about? And that's really the place maybe I'd like to go, if we can, is really talk about that trajectory piece.
Yeah. I would love to, if you can share an example with us to how these tests work and what do they tell us that is different from the labs and the scans and the biomarkers that we look into.
Sure. So maybe the simplest test of all is just walking speed. So there are a number of ways to define walking speed, various distances, largely depending on ability. If we're testing a 90-year-old for walking speed, we're probably not doing a mile test. We're doing like a 3-meter test. But nevertheless, we're still doing a gait speed measurement. And we know based on what that speed is, it correlates to any number of other things. But walking speed is one of those things where we probably have the best data on function across the lifespan. And going back to those first steps as a baby to what's your walking speed, it peaks around early 20s, like 21, 22. And then it starts this long, slow decline through adulthood. And then around age 60 or so, it starts to decline at a faster rate. And so with longitudinal studies, which give us the benefit of following not just a lot of individuals, like I have over 700,000 in terms of what I'm drawing from the data pool, but to look at longitudinal studies where we followed the same individuals for a long time. So it really gets us to a point of understanding what does behavior look like over long periods of time, which again, even in medicine, we don't follow individuals for long periods of time. We follow them from the point we identify some problem usually until we've hopefully treated them and got them back on the norm. There's things we're going to keep records of, but we're only going to go back and look at them if there's some trend that we're probably paying attention to or need to pay attention to.
And what is the source of this data?
It's a number of longitudinal studies through the UK, through Canada and the US. I think there's about 6 kind of primary studies that amount to over 700,000 individuals. And over a period of about 50 years, the UK Biobank is the single biggest source. But people like the Cooper Institution, Ken Cooper, who I had the pleasure of meeting just a few weeks ago, has done a lot of work over the years, again, but it never really found its way into a broad perspective. And maybe that's the place I'd suggest we could talk about is what's also unique about this is to look at function across multiple domains that no one has ever thought to do before for some reason. Because again, we're all stovepipe. We tend to look at walking or running, right, in the running sphere. We look at balance primarily in later life or some other disability, and cognitive health. And for my students as adults, cognitive health is their number one concern. May not be their highest risk, but it's clearly top of mind for them.
You introduced the idea of functional age, something that can be measured and changed. How should people relate this concept without turning into another source of anxiety for comparison?
Well, I can't manage your anxiety, but what I will say is so long as you continue to avoid data, you will always have more anxiety than those who get comfortable with it. So the idea of functional age, so we would all kind of look to individuals who appear to not just look young, but they tend to move much younger than their peers. And so the airport is always a great place to sit and watch and see the difference in functional ability. It really shows up in an airport circumstance because you have such a broad population to look at. A lot of people that you don't see every day. It's outside your normal circle. They're having to walk. They're having to carry heavy things. They're getting up and down out of chairs. They're having to get their bag up above in the storage compartment. So they're doing all things that give you and I as an observer a look into it. So functional age is really the age to say, how do you move? Do you move like a person of your age, or do you move like someone who's older or someone who's younger? And of course, if we're interested in optimal aging, it says, no, I want to move like someone who's younger than I am. And typically where we see that range is there's probably about a plus minus 15 range. So a 30-year range of motion in terms of functional ability for any given chronological age.
How did you validate this concept of functional age, Scott? I'm curious.
So it's relatively simple because, again, you've got so much data. We've got percentile data where we can look at what percentile of the population is, that range I just referred to. And I tend to look at, let's say using the 80-20 rule, we throw out the top 10% who are elite for whatever reason, and we throw out the bottom 10% because they've got some disability. Let's look at the 80%. So when we think about functional age, it really comes back to the median. And if the median lines up with a chronological age, and so if you do a walking speed, we'll just use that example again, and your walking speed is 1.5 meters per second for your age, and that's your median, says your chronological age matches your functional age. If, on the other hand, your walking speed is 0.5 meter faster, which is significantly faster, we don't need to go that far, but we could just say if it's 10% faster, it means you're probably about 10 years younger. And if it's 10% slower, you're about 10 years older. So that's really all we're looking at with functional age, is to say, where is the median for that activity? And it's also sex and age-based data.
Is there also, because when we talk about data, and obviously we want to talk about the generalizability, what is the richness in terms of all of these other factors, race, you mentioned age and sex, what about racial and ethnicity representation?
So I stopped at I limited it to age and sex, and I said, what I'm more interested in is the portfolio. Let's look at multiple domains rather than try to distill down too much, because it starts to paralyze the average person if you go too deep on it. And my goal all along was to say, how can I put something really simple and straightforward in front of people that they can quickly, again, find out where they are within that range. Like, so again, I'll use walking as the example. If your legs are a little bit shorter than the person next to you and they have, exceptionally long legs, yes, there's going to be about a 10% difference, perhaps, just based. Actually, no, it's less than that. So I think it's only about 3% difference between walking speed for leg length. We're not trying to split hairs here on whether you're 2 or 3%. I'm trying to find out, are you going where you think you're going? And if you're not, let's find out and let's understand what you need to be doing and what you need to get to be able to get on that trajectory that you'd like to be on.
So as a crude guiding measure, and not to be obsessed about the exactness of it, but it is a guiding direction, it sounds.
Right. Because even within all these studies, they all have, they're using different populations. There's probably, some subtle differences in how they took measurements and gathered data, all the usual things when you start to do, pull multiple studies together. I don't want to get caught in the weeds of any of that. The fact that this is the first time that anyone's looked at it, I don't think we want to get into the minutia there and miss the whole point of what it is we're trying to do.
It's a great primer to start working in and focus on the nuance of this work. So I really appreciate that. There is the strong message in what you are sharing through this book, in that longevity in general favors maybe people who are broadly capable, and not narrowly optimized. So, and we are a culture that is becoming more and more now obsessed with this, with the extremes of longevity, being, be it biohacking and the supplements and tests that for how long and how many years one can preserve. And you are going back to basics and focusing on the grounds, and the simplicity of your messages that start from capacity and capability. So how can we relearn to harmonize and bring things back to center, thinking about function?
Yeah. So I guess if I kind of look at it from what we would describe in medical sense as homeostasis, right? So it's that same balance in terms of functional ability. If in everything, if you kind of read enough material, balance is king, but balance is boring. It's not controversial, right? So it doesn't lend itself to headlines, unfortunately. So, and that's not going to change. My book isn't going to do anything to change that. But it was really about, the flip side is to say, well, what's out of balance in your life, right? And so we look at all the things that can be out of balance, whether it's stress, inactivity. I took that same approach to say, well, let's find out what's out of balance. And so if we think about all the messages that everyone getting out there, so things like, what are hot topics today? Well, you're not getting enough protein. You're not doing enough strength training. You're not doing enough aerobic training was kind of the yesterday's message. And what's tomorrow's message? It'll be something different again, right? So what we find out is that if you focus on any one thing, it's always ultimately usually going to be at the expense of something else. And so in function, we know that there are these 5 domains of function. What I set out, and as I realized, I started to really work with the data more. If you think strength training is the number one, well, that's okay. But the number 1 and number 2 aren't going to decide your health span. It's the bottom of the list. It's the weak link is the one that's going to define your health span. That's the one you'd better be paying attention to, because it's not going to go away. It's waiting for you until that moment when it's going to reveal itself.
Excellent. So if someone was listening today and wanted to take one practical step to improve their function, without buying anything or changing their identity, where would you suggest they start?
I think the place to start is really thinking about kind of maybe what I said earlier about food, right? Like, just keep it really simple. So what are the things you're doing, and are you doing them intentionally, or are you just kind of going about a routine? Could you do it better, whether it's better form, a little bit more intensity, a little bit more duration, whatever it might be, but also really be honest and say, what have I been avoiding for a long time? And why is that? And those are usually the places where you're going to have the best opportunities. So again, if I use a social example, like if I tend to be a loner and I avoid people, I know that from a longevity standpoint, that's not a good idea. I'd better find a way to socialize more. So on the functional side of it, it would be things like, what do I like? And flip around and say, well, what don't you like? And find some way of revisiting the things that you maybe have been avoiding and find a new way to explore. And so I'd say the one thing is talk to people. Say, what do you do about whatever? It's your balance. What do you do about flexibility? And find out some new ways to reinvent and revisit things that you maybe hated in your childhood that you suddenly decide, you know what? I don't know why I hated it. It's actually kind of fun now, right? So what you hated 10 years or 50 years ago really doesn't matter, right? It's what's today and what's forward is really all that matters.
I'd like the flexibility of this message is that we're dynamic stories. We're not just one fixed direction, and what might have happened before might change later. Although I know some people might find that controversial and say we are determined or predetermined as some of the work. I'm curious if Scott, you can give us maybe or share with us a story from your own practice, any patient that you've worked with or someone that you've known where they exemplify this work of function that you shared with us.
Sure. And it's actually, I think, an interesting one because it's surprising, right? So it's a woman who was in my couple of my classes and was in more in the Wealthspan era where we kind of talked about the general aspects, and then came to me a year later after class one day. And I actually thought she was upset about something. I wondered what had happened in class or something, but she had, and so a lot of times so these are students, I don't know their personal health journey unless they offer something, and that's usually one-on-one, which I didn't know about what she'd been dealing with, but she'd been dealing with osteoporosis. And so she had just recently had a visit with her physician, and the physician had said, it's okay to go off your osteoporosis medications. I don't think you need them now based on your recent DEXA scan. And so what it said was to her was that because she had not been doing much physical activity, she was kind of not sedentary in the way we tend to frame them. Think the more the librarian type, right? Just kind of slight and not active. And she had got it more involved. And the more she got involved in being active, she started to do some strength training. And so a combination of the medication and more strength training, bone density had improved sufficiently. So it clearly wasn't that bad to start with, but she took he heeded the warning sign because she's coming to my class. She's already intentional about her health and had made enough gains in bone density to say that she was going to continue doing the strength. It wasn't like she was done, but she realized she didn't need to have the medication any longer. And that's ultimately, I think, for generally we would say across healthcare is, for many of us, is I'd like to minimize the medication that my patients require. It's not anything wrong with medication, but ideally, how can I minimize it? Because I don't know what the side effects are, in other areas and competitions as they get older and they're on 20 or more medications at once. I want to push that period out as long as I possibly can. So that's a good one because it's unexpected, right? We think of osteoporosis as generally fixed. We don't think it is necessarily as lifestyle adapted as much. And I'm not suggesting everyone's going to have that same response. But these are the sorts of things that happen when essentially we start to stimulate function in ways that we hadn't been doing for several years.
If there are other important messages that you would like to share from this book, what are the takeaways that you would like for people to? And I know we don't want to give too much about the book, but if from culminating your expertise in your important work, what are the key messages that you would like for people to
I think one of them is really an opportunity to understand your cognitive future. When we think about function, we tend to focus on the physical side, and the cognitive piece is just this black box. And I just, fingers crossed, I hope that doesn't happen to me or someone in my circle. So within the cognitive realm, we really have two elements that drive us to understand future cognitive health, or at least reduce risk. And so one of them is the physical, which is the base that we need for future cognitive health. But the other is that I quite intentionally put in here, because a lot of my teaching is around essentially understanding the brain and understanding dementia. What can we do to reduce it? Is to start to understand, well, what are the things I can test around cognitive health today, a decade or more before anyone's ever going to subject me to a cognitive test in a formal sense. And so those are things where we describe them as generally dual task training, which are, interestingly enough, gaming like the things that we used to do when we were kids. These end up being, so we think of cognitive testing as, oh my God, that's scary, right? It's kind of like going for cancer screening. Like, I could get a really bad outcome here, but this is actually training and activities that are truly fun, and you can start to do them with other people. And any number of ways, like things like pickleball. Like I would say, why is pickleball so taken off and so popular? One is because it's the gamesmanship of it that happens to be really good for the brain too. As long as you don't injure yourself, your brain is going to benefit from pickleball, even if your body maybe has a few bumps and grinds. So it's really, I think, around there's a lot more empowering information out there than we're generally presented with, and it's getting harder to find those, I think, in our modern world.
I love the message of this, because it's the importance that we don't do things in silos, and we cannot focus on things just in silos. We're not improving nutrition without also taking care of movement, physical activities, sleep, social connections. Or these do not work apart from each other. That combining and integrating these things together is a key. And as you said, you gave the pickleball example, is you're bringing the element of strategy, cognitive, interaction, social, physical, and movement. So all of these are important, and to focus on things way before, because now research is clear about our risk of dementia and Alzheimer's and all other forms of cognitive impairment is something that starts way earlier than we expected before. So we need to pay attention to these things as early as possible and start to ask the questions.
Yeah, exactly. I think, I describe it as these are all interdependent, right? They all operate together. Every one lever we reach for is pulling on at least three others, and probably more. And that's why I think that the cognitive piece is so important here, because by the time you get a diagnosis for, say, cognitive impairment, you're already well down the path. And while there's things for sure that we can do, and we've seen some successes, like, why not just kind of do things that are fun and push that another decade out if you can? And again, have fun, and it doesn't cost you anything in the meantime. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, these are really great things. Speaking of having fun, I know Dave is ready with some rapid fire questions.
Yeah, so we wanted to close with a few quick lighthearted questions. First thought, no overthinking. So the first question is, a daily movement or activity you would never skip, even if you're busy.
I always go for some kind of a hike. I happen to live, I'm looking at my window, I live into a mountain, and it just calls to me every day, and I got a pathway right out my driveway. So I'm very fortunate, but yeah.
Love it. Number 2, a common fitness or aging myth you wish would quietly disappear.
Oh boy, this one's going to be tougher. An aging myth. Well, I think one would be is that dementia is inevitable.
That's great. Number 3, one simple ability you think people underestimate until it's gone.
Well, we could take this any number of levels, but I think I'll take it to something as simple as just getting dressed.
And then last question, a hobby or activity you hope to still be doing decades from now.
I would love to be able to still be riding my bike, and with all of the e-bikes that a lot of my colleagues and medical friends have, it seems like I don't have to have much leg strength to do it. But yeah, and I live in a place where we have just incredible cycling. That would be the absolute bonus if I was able to do that.
What a great answer. So,
Scott, what is something that you may expect people to be surprised about with your book?
I think they'll be surprised about what they discover about themselves, because I think we're all brainwashed to believe certain things, right? That we're not doing something enough. So there'll be things that I think they'll find like, I'm actually in pretty good shape there. Why was I worrying about it? Right? This isn't about all finding weak spots. It's also finding about things. Don't worry about it. You're in good shape.
Scott, I just want to thank you for bringing clarity and humility to a space that's often crowded with noise. This conversation emphasizes the significance that health isn't about chasing the perfect numbers, but about preserving the capacity to live fully, adapt, and stay engaged with life.
Really great to have you, Scott. We appreciate you. Appreciate the time that you have made for us and sharing your exciting work. Every time I've seen you speak or see you at any of the conferences, I only just see the spirit of sharing and caring and your genuine work to take this mission of living healthy and well to better horizons. So I appreciate you.
Thank you both. There's a genuine commitment to educate. That's really what I'm about. I love the education. I love there's so much opportunity all around us, and anything I can do to help people realize and cash in on those opportunities is just I've done what I could for one person on any one day, and that's we should all be so grateful to be able to do that.
Indeed, our pleasure. For our listeners, we encourage you to explore Dr. Fulton's book or books, Wealthspan and Function. It is a great read, and not just a read. It is a great guide to leverage, to ponder, to ask the questions, and to act on them. They're not; these books are not instruction manuals, and this is what I truly, personally appreciate about them. There are invitations to ask better questions about how our own bodies, minds, and future just are going to be shaped up, rather than focusing on just the biohacks or these abstract markers that we were becoming more and more obsessed about. And that is not to diminish their values. This work really centers on measurable and real world function. Strength, mobility, endurance, balance, cognition, and how all of these predict independence, resilience, and quality of life across the lifespan. We are grateful for Dr. Fulton for his time, and until next time, inward with courage, outward with compassion.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you for joining the Well-Being Manifesto Podcast. Be sure to subscribe, like, and leave us a comment or review. To learn more about this discussion, visit thewellbeingmanifesto.com. And remember, inward with courage, outward with compassion.